up north, everyone was very polite, except for every other word would be cunt.
Having your own office in New York, in the Union Truck Terminal, was fucking great. It was fun. No problem at all. Did it work? What's work?
The gigs were good though. It was good until we had all our gear stolen. Once we had the gear stolen, it was like taking another bloody kicking after Ian. It was really difficult. But I suppose the thing is that we laughed through that. Because if we hadn't have laughed, I don't know what we'd have done.
The club scene in New York at that time was pretty heady and hedonistic and quite druggy and very liberal. And again, for us, you know, Manchester wasn't such a big place, and it was an eye-opener. And I think it probably gave Tony ideas.
Especially going to places like New York and hearing like samba music and Brazilian music and Latin music, and what's that instrument, you know, talking drum, ooh, ooh, and thinking, right, we want one of them, and you know, just soaking up all this musical influence.
I had the radio in New York and I could listen to a world of different music, and within that I developed an interest in salsa and Latin American music in general, which is a world of its own anyway.
Martin was as mad as ever. He insisted on staying in a 4-star hotel, Gramercy Park, whereas we were, you know, living in a hovel, the Iroquois. And yeah, so he was just acting quite normally.
People always used to say to us, you sound better live than you do on record. And having the best, funkiest drummer in Britain, and someone making him play his bass drum separate and then his snare drum separate and then his hi-hat, just took all the groove out of the music. And the whole idea of going to New York to record our first album was to soak up some of the New York influences. But what happened was it turned out into, like, you know, Martin taking the funk out of us.
He spent hours and hours and hours EQing everything up, and we came in the next day and the engineer had put everything back to zero, and Martin had a fit, and threw a tray of cups and saucers or biscuits or something across the room.
It's one of Tony Wilson's stories about the desk being zeroed. Martin Hannett never wanted to mix it in New York because Martin Hannett was very, very lost without Chris Nagle. Chris Nagle was, you know, Martin Hannett and Chris Nagle together were the people that made that sound of the early Factory stuff. And Martin never wanted to mix it in America because the studio wasn't as good as Strawberry Studios. Obviously Strawberry Studios, because it was owned by 10cc, it was state-of-the-art, it was really high-tech. And Ears, the studio that we were at, didn't have AMS delays and Marshall time modulators, so it didn't have the toys that Martin Hannett needed for his sound.
The 2 each sleeve, Simon, it was very complicated what Simon's brief was that he wanted me to do, and there were so many images he wanted in it, and then Peter Christopherson was doing the layout and it was going to be sent down to him. He was doing something totally different, and to be honest, there's a little boy on the back of the sleeve and I wanted that to be on the front, and they used the trumpet playing hands are actually Miles Davis's hands, and the boys walking into the jungle, there's sort of like an in-joke as to why they're walking into the jungle, which I can't reveal, and I'm sorry I can't reveal it, but it's private between me and ACR, and it's not what everyone thinks either. It's not. They're not. What people said. Oh, they're walking into a gas chamber, and they're not walking into a gas chamber. It's nothing like that at all. But I actually hate that painting. I hated it when I did it, but there was no time left to do anything else, so that was used, and it's a shame they didn't use the little boy on the back, because I think that would have been a lot better. But artistically, I think the actual painting on the front is absolutely grotesque.